The hedgerow stands silent, tall, thick, unmoving. It looks peaceful. But nothing here is safe. An American soldier crouches low in a narrow lane. The earth is damp under his boots. The air feels heavy that he cannot see more than a few steps ahead. Every field is boxed in by green walls, tall hedges, old roots, packed soil and stone. They block the view, they block the sound, they block escape. He grips his rifle tighter. Not because he sees danger, but because he cannot. Somewhere beyond the hedge, someone is waiting. He does not know where. He does not know when. He only knows that moving forward feels like stepping into the dark. This is not how the war was supposed to feel. Back on the beaches, the landing had been loud and fast. Chaos, noise, smoke, motion. Here, everything is slow. Too slow. Men advance one field at a time. They stop. They listen. They wait. A single step forward can change everything. A wrong move can trap a whole unit. There is no wide open ground. No clear line of sight. Only narrow paths and hidden corners. Orders come quietly, hand signals, short whispers. Even voices feel dangerous here. The soldier hears something. A rustle. Or maybe just the wind. He freezes. Seconds stretch. His heart beats louder than the world around him. He wonders if the sound gave him away. This land feels alive. Not friendly, not neutral, watching. The hedgerows were not built for war. They were built by farmers. To mark land. To protect fields. To keep animals in. Now they protect something else. Every hedge hides fear. Every hedge hides doubt. Every hedge hides an enemy that refuses to be seen. American commanders had maps. They had plans. They had numbers. They believed power would bring speed. But maps do not show fear. They do not show blind corners. They do not show how the land breaks confidence. Down here, among the roots and dirt, power feels useless. Tanks struggle to move, radios fail to reach, units lose each other within minutes. A soldier looks back. The men behind him are gone. Not dead, just lost. He does not know if he is leading. Or following. Or alone. Time passes differently here. Minutes feel like hours. Silence feels louder than battle. Then, without warning, the quiet breaks. Not with a roar, not with a charge, but with sudden shock. Someone shouts. Someone drops to the ground. Orders collide with confusion. No one knows where it started. And no one knows where it will end. The soldier presses into the dirt. His breath is short. His thoughts scatter. He remembers training. He remembers words spoken far away from here. Words about momentum, about pushing forward. But momentum has no meaning inside a hedge. Here, survival comes before victory. Here, patience matters more than strength. Here, fear sits beside courage. Across the hedgerow, German soldiers wait. They know this land. They know every rise and dip. They do not rush. They listen, they observe, they let the land do the work. For them, time is a weapon. This is not a single clash. It is a slow pressure. A grinding test of nerves. Each field is taken, then the next, then the next. Progress is measured in steps, not miles. Above all this, far from the hedges, decisions are being made. Commanders look at reports. They see lines moving forward. They do not feel the weight of the silence. Down here, the soldier feels it all. The smell of soil, the tightness in his chest, the waiting. He wonders how long this will last. He wonders if this place will ever let them pass. The name St. Lo is spoken quietly among the men, not as a goal, but as something distant, something guarded by the land itself. This battle is not loud. It does not announce itself. It creeps. It presses. It drains. And as the soldier prepares to move again, he understands one thing clearly. This fight will not be won by speed. It will not be won by force alone. It will be won by those who learn. Or it will not be won at all. As the men step forward into the next hedgerow, the war tightens its grip, and the real test of St. Lo is only beginning. St. Lo was not famous. It was not large. It was not beautiful anymore. By the time the fighting reached it, the town was broken and tired. Stone buildings stood damaged, roads were scarred, church towers no longer guided travelers. But to the armies moving through Normandy, St. Lo was everything. This small place sat at the center of the land. Roads met here. Paths crossed here. Whoever controlled St. Lo controlled movement. For the Americans, this mattered more than pride. It was about time. After landing on the coast, they had expected speed. They believed that once the beaches were secured, the land beyond would open. They believed power and numbers would carry them forward. Instead, they were stuck. Every day spent near the hedgerows was a day lost. Supplies piled up behind them. Men grew tired, plans began to stretch thin. St. Lo stood in the way of something bigger. A breakout. A chance to leave the hedgerows behind. A chance to turn the slow grind into motion. If St. Lo fell, roads would open. Tanks could move, air support could guide the advance. The war in Normandy could finally breathe. If it did not, the invasion itself felt fragile. German commanders understood this clearly. They did not need to win here. They did not need to push the Americans back to the sea. They only needed to delay. Every hour mattered. Every day gained allowed other defenses to form. Every pause weakened Allied momentum. St. Lo became a place to slow time. German units used the land with care. They chose positions that forced attackers to expose themselves. They waited instead of chasing. They let frustration grow. They knew the Americans wanted speed. So they offered slowness. For soldiers on both sides, the town became a symbol. Not of glory, but of pressure. American soldiers spoke of St. Lo as a barrier. Something just out of reach. Something that refused to come closer no matter how much effort was spent. German soldiers spoke of it as a task. Hold long enough. Disappear when needed. Do not waste strength. Above the battlefield, commanders felt the weight of expectations. Allied leaders faced voices from far away. Voices asking why progress was slow. Why numbers and machines were not enough. Why the war did not move as planned. Maps showed small advances. But maps could not show exhaustion. Every delay at St. Lo sent a quiet message. This war would not be easy. This land would not surrender quickly. Weather added to the pressure. Rain turned fields into mud. Vehicles sank. Foot soldiers slipped and struggled. Each problem fed the next. The Germans counted on this. Not victory, but strain. St. Lo did not promise safety to them either. They were stretched thin. They lacked supplies. They knew air power could strike at any moment. But holding St. Lo bought something priceless. Time. Time to regroup. Time to move reserves. Time to prepare for what came next. For the Americans, the town represented a question. Could they adapt? Could they learn? Could they fight a battle they had not expected? This was no longer about landing successfully. That story was already written. This was about proving that the invasion could continue, that it could grow, that it could survive resistance. St. Lo stood between hope and delay. Every order, every patrol, every push forward carried that weight. Men knew they were not just fighting for a town, they were fighting for momentum. Failure here would not end the war, but it would slow it, and slowing a war costs lives in quieter ways. As the struggle tightened around St. Lo, pressure rose on every level, from the highest command rooms to the lowest hedgerow ditch. The town waited, silent, ruined, unimpressed by plans or promises. And as both sides prepared to commit more men, more effort, and more risk, one truth became clear. St. Lo mattered because it decided what kind of war this would become next. A war that moved forward. Or a war that stayed trapped in the fields. The ground was set, the stakes were understood, and the world that existed before St. Lo was about to disappear. Before St. Lo became a name spoken with tension, the world around it was already under strain. Across the channel, leaders waited for results. They had promised speed, they had promised progress. They had promised that the hardest part was over. On paper, the invasion had worked. The beaches were secured, ports were planned, supplies flowed in steady lines. But inland, the war refused to follow the script. The land of Normandy was older than the armies fighting over it. Its fields were small, its paths were narrow, its hedgerows were thick and deep, grown over centuries. No one had planned for them to fight back. American units moved forward with confidence at first. They expected resistance, but not delay. They expected movement, not hesitation. Instead, every step forward became work. Every field became a task. Every small gain cost time and energy. The pressure began to build quietly. Commanders sent reports upward. Progress was steady, they said. Controlled, they said. But steady was not enough. Behind the front lines, supplies piled up. Men waited for orders that kept changing, units rotated in and out, carrying fatigue with them. The war was slowing down and everyone could feel it. For the Germans, the world before St. Lo looked very different. They were not strong, they were not fresh, they were not confident of victory. But they understood something important. They did not need to defeat the invasion. They only needed to stretch it. German forces were under constant pressure from the air. Movement by day was dangerous. Communication was difficult. Supplies were limited. Still, the hedgerows gave them something powerful. Cover, concealment, control of distance. They prepared not for a single battle but for a series of delays. Each unit knew its role: hold as long as possible, withdraw before being crushed, make the enemy pay in time and effort. This was a defensive war shaped by patience. As days passed, both sides felt the weight of expectation. American commanders worried about momentum, about public confidence, about proving that the invasion was not stuck. German commanders worried about collapse, about holding lines with fewer men, about guessing where the next push would come. Neither side felt comfortable. Neither side felt secure. Weather made everything worse. Rain softened the ground. Mud slowed vehicles. Foot soldiers carried heavier loads through thicker earth. The land seemed to resist movement itself. Every delay fed doubt. Soldiers began to wonder when this would end. Not the war, just this part of it. St. Lo slowly moved from being a point on a map to a destination filled with meaning. It became the place where patience would be tested, where plans would be proven or broken, where learning would be forced. Before the first serious push toward the town, the mood had changed. This was no longer about confidence, it was about endurance. The world before St. Lo was one of expectation and belief. Belief in speed. Belief in power. Belief in planning. That world was fading. What came next would demand something different. Adaptation, humility, and hard choices made under pressure. As men adjusted their gear and commanders studied the land again, everyone sensed the same truth. The battle ahead would not reward hope alone, it would reward those who understood the ground, the enemy, and their own limits. And as the focus narrowed toward St. Lo, the minds that would shape the battle began to prepare for decisions that could not be undone. Far from the hedgerows, decisions were being made in quiet rooms. Maps lay flat on tables. Lines were drawn and redrawn. Arrows pointed forward with confidence that did not exist on the ground. American commanders felt pressure from every direction. From above, from behind, from the men moving slowly through the fields. They were expected to move fast. They were expected to prove that the invasion had power. They were expected to show results. Some believed more force would solve the problem. More men, more tanks, more pressure. Others sensed something deeper, that this land demanded change, not just strength. Patience was hard to accept, especially when the world was watching. Every delay felt personal. Every slow report felt like failure. German commanders faced a different kind of weight. They knew they were weaker, they knew they could not hold forever, they knew air power ruled the sky. But they trusted the ground. They trusted the hedgerows to hide them. They trusted confusion to slow the enemy. They trusted fear to do part of the work. Their orders were simple: hold, delay, survive. They did not chase glory, they chased time. Some German officers believed the Americans would grow impatient, that mistakes would follow frustration, that pushing too hard would create openings. Others worried about being cut off, about losing contact, about sudden collapse. Fear lived on both sides, it simply wore different uniforms. On the American side, confidence mixed with doubt. Commanders trusted their men, but questioned the land. On the German side, realism mixed with hope. They expected defeat someday, but not today, not here. Communication was fragile. Orders traveled slowly, information arrived incomplete. A commander might believe a unit was advancing, in reality, it could be pinned down, lost in a field, unsure which direction was forward. Ego played its quiet role. Some leaders believed experience alone would win the day. Others believed caution was weakness, Few truly understood how blind everyone had become. The hedgerows did not care about rank. They did not respect plans, they treated all men the same. Down below, soldiers sensed the distance between command and reality. They followed orders, they trusted leadership, but they felt the gaps. A decision made miles away could mean waiting longer in silence, or moving forward without clarity, or holding ground that felt impossible to defend. Leadership became less about speeches and more about small choices. When to push, when to stop, when to wait. German officers walked a thin line. Hold too long and units would be crushed. Pull back too early and ground would be lost too fast. American officers faced the opposite problem. Push too hard and chaos followed. Move too slow and momentum died. Every mind involved carried fear. Fear of making the wrong call. Fear of being remembered for failure. St. Lo pulled those fears closer. As commanders prepared for the next phase, beliefs began to shift. Confidence softened. Certainty faded. Both sides began to understand that this battle would not be decided by one bold move. It would be decided by many small ones. And as orders finally moved forward, the land waited again. Silent. Unchanged. Ready. The next step would bring contact. Real contact. Where decisions met consequences. The first push did not arrive with a roar. It came with hesitation. Men stepped forward carefully, not charging, not rushing, simply trying to move. Orders were clear on paper. Advance. Clear the fields, secure the ground. On the land itself, nothing felt clear. Units entered the hedgerows in small groups. They moved along narrow lanes, walls of earth and roots rose on both sides. Vision dropped to a few steps. Sound bent and echoed. Distance lost meaning. A squad could be close and still feel alone. The first contact was sudden. Not loud, not dramatic. Just confusion. Someone shouted. Someone dropped flat. Someone fired without seeing a target. The calm broke apart. Men tried to find cover where no cover truly existed. The hedgerows hid everything. Friend, enemy, direction. Orders were hard to hear. Radios failed. Hand signals were missed. Plans dissolved field by field. American units pushed forward with courage. But courage did not solve the land. Tanks tried to support the advance. They moved slowly, carefully. Their size made them powerful in open ground. Here it made them trapped. The hedgerows blocked their view. The narrow paths limited movement. Every turn felt risky. Infantry stayed close, hoping for protection. But protection was never complete. German defenders did not rush forward. They stayed hidden. They waited. They knew the ground better. They let the attackers move first. They let uncertainty grow. Each small clash created ripples of confusion. Units became unsure of their position. Commanders lost track of progress. A field taken did not feel secure. The next one felt even worse. Men learned quickly that silence was dangerous. But noise was too. Every sound might reveal position. Every movement might draw attention. Fear was not loud. It sat quietly in the chest. It tightened the breath. It slowed the step. Time stretched again. Minutes passed without change. Then suddenly everything happened at once. Someone moved too fast. Someone misunderstood an order. A push turned into a scramble. Men pressed forward because stopping felt worse. The battle was no longer a single line. It became many small fights. Disconnected. Uneven. Above the hedgerows, commanders tried to make sense of reports. They received fragments, short messages, unclear outcomes. Progress was happening, but it did not feel like success. Every gain cost effort. Every pause cost confidence. German defenders felt the pressure too. Air power hovered above. Supplies were thin, retreat paths were uncertain. They held because they had to, not because they wanted to. The battle around St. Lo ignited without a single moment to define it. It burned slowly, quietly, relentlessly. Men realized this was not a fight that would end in hours or days. This was a test of endurance, of learning under pressure, of surviving confusion. As the fighting spread across the fields, one truth became clear to everyone involved. This battle would not reward speed. It would punish mistakes. and it would force change. The hedgerows had turned planning into chaos, and the only way forward now was through hard decisions that could not be delayed any longer. Inside the confusion, learning began. Not in classrooms, not in meetings, but in moments of fear. A squad reached a hedgerow and stopped. They had done this before. They knew what might happen next. This time they tried something different. Instead of rushing over, they waited, they listened, they watched the earth itself. A small choice, but it mattered. Across the battlefield, similar moments appeared. Quiet adjustments, quick thinking, survival guiding decisions faster than orders. American soldiers began to understand the land. Not fully, but enough. They learned that moving straight ahead was dangerous, that flanks mattered, that patience could save lives. Engineers were pulled forward. They studied the hedgerows closely, they touched the soil, they measured thickness with their eyes. These hedges were not bushes, they were walls. Roots ran deep, soil was packed hard. Centuries old. Tanks could not simply break through, they needed help. Someone had an idea. Not brilliant, just practical. Metal was welded onto tank fronts. Simple blades. Rough tools. The goal was not elegance, it was movement. When the modified tanks rolled forward, the effect was immediate. Not perfect, but better. They could push through hedges instead of climbing them, they could surprise instead of announce themselves. A small change, a big difference. On the ground, leaders adjusted how they moved men. Units advanced in shorter steps. They paused more often. They coordinated closely with tanks. Mistakes still happened. Confusion still ruled. But the balance began to shift. German defenders noticed it too. The land was still strong, but the enemy was learning. Fields that once stopped advances now fell faster. Not easily, but steadily. German units faced harder choices. Hold longer and risk being trapped, or fall back and give ground. Neither option felt safe. Moments of bravery appeared without ceremony. A soldier crawling forward to check a path. A leader standing to give direction despite danger. A unit holding ground just long enough for others to move. These moments did not change the war alone. But together they changed the day. Turning points did not arrive with banners or speeches. They arrived quietly. A field cleared faster than expected. A road opened briefly. A unit stayed connected instead of getting lost. Confidence did not return suddenly. It grew carefully, step by step. St. Lo felt closer now, not near, but reachable. German defenders began to feel pressure from behind and above. Air power increased. Supplies shrank further. Retreat paths narrowed. Holding St. Lo was becoming harder. American commanders noticed the change. Reports became clearer. Movement felt more controlled. Still costly, still slow. But no longer blind. The battle had entered a new phase. Not won. Not decided. But understood. The hedgerows were no longer a mystery. They were still dangerous. But no longer unbeatable. As both sides adjusted again, one thing was certain. The choices made now would decide not just St. Lo, but what came after. The fighting around St. Lo did not break people all at once. It wore them down slowly, hour after hour. Field after field, the land demanded attention, patience, and energy that never fully returned once spent. Soldiers lived in a constant state of alert. Even when nothing happened, their bodies stayed tense. Sleep came in short moments, often broken by noise, orders, or fear that something was about to happen. Many could not tell if a sound was the enemy, a friend, or just the land settling in the night. Exhaustion became normal. Boots stayed wet, clothes stayed dirty, meals were rushed or missed. There was rarely time to rest properly because holding ground mattered as much as taking it. A field won during the day could be lost by night if attention faded. Fear was quiet but constant. Not the kind that makes men run, but the kind that sits in the stomach and never leaves. Soldiers learned to live with it even as it shaped every step they took. Many later said the waiting was harder than the fighting itself. Medics moved carefully through narrow paths, never knowing what waited beyond the next hedge. They worked fast, focused on keeping people alive, not on what the land was doing around them. There was no time for hero stories. Only time to help, move, and hope. German soldiers felt the same weight. They were tired, they were stretched thin, They lived with the knowledge that air power ruled the skies and that retreat might be sudden and dangerous. Still, they stayed because orders demanded it and because delay mattered more than comfort or safety. For both sides, the battle reduced life to small concerns. Water, dry ground, a few minutes of rest, clear instructions. Simple things gained enormous value. Friendships formed quickly and deeply. Men depended on the person beside them more than on distant plans or promises. Trust became local. Personal, that a shared glance meant more than words. As days passed, the cost of the battle showed itself in quiet ways. Not just in losses but in tired eyes, slower reactions and short tempers. Morale rose and fell with each small success or setback. St. Lo did not feel like a victory waiting to happen. It felt like a test that never ended. Yet people kept moving forward. Not because they felt brave every moment but because stopping felt worse. Because others depended on them. Because the war demanded it. This human cost did not decide the battle on its own, but it shaped how it ended. It forced commanders to act carefully. It forced soldiers to adapt. It reminded everyone involved that progress always came with a price. As the fighting pushed closer to the town itself, both sides sensed that the struggle was reaching its breaking point. Something had to give. The end did not arrive suddenly. It came after pressure built for days, until holding on no longer made sense. By the time American forces reached the edges of St. Lo, the town was already changed. Buildings stood broken and empty. Streets were quiet in a way that felt unnatural. There was no feeling of triumph waiting here. German units understood the situation clearly. They had delayed as long as possible. They had slowed the advance. They had forced the enemy to learn the hard way. Now the risk was no longer delay. It was being trapped. Orders shifted from holding ground to pulling back. Not in panic. Not in chaos, but carefully where possible. Some units withdrew at night. Others slipped away through damaged roads and narrow paths. They left behind positions that had cost the Americans days to reach. For the soldiers moving into St. Lo, victory felt heavy. There were no cheers. No celebrations. Only relief mixed with exhaustion. The town did not feel like a prize. It felt like proof of survival. Men walked through streets where almost nothing stood untouched. They looked for cover out of habit. Even when no one was firing, their bodies had learned caution too well to let it go quickly. Commanders marked the capture of St. Lo as a success. On maps, lines finally moved forward in a meaningful way. Roads that had been blocked were now open. But everyone understood the cost. This victory had not been fast. It had not been clean. It had not been easy. It had been earned one field at a time. For the Americans, St. Lo changed how the war would be fought. They no longer trusted speed alone. They trusted learning. They trusted adaptation. The Hedgerow lesson stayed with them as they prepared for the next phase. New tactics. Better coordination. More respect for the ground. For the Germans, the loss of St. Lo was not the end, but it was a signal. The delay had worked, but only for so long. The pressure would now grow faster and harder. Momentum, once slow and uncertain, began to shift. St. Lo opened the door to movement beyond the hedgerows. It made the breakout possible. It allowed the war in Normandy to change shape. Yet for the soldiers who fought there, St. Lo would always mean something else. It meant waiting in silence. It meant fear without clear danger. It meant learning under pressure. It was not remembered for a single dramatic moment. It was remembered for endurance. In the wider war, St. Lo rarely stands in the spotlight. The beaches came before it. The breakout came after it. But without St. Lo, neither truly makes sense. This battle showed that power means little without understanding. That land can humble even the strongest armies. That victory often belongs to those who adapt, not those who rush. St. Lo reminds us that war is not only decided by bold moves. It is decided by patience, learning, and the human ability to endure uncertainty. The hedgerows still stand in Normandy today. Quiet. Green, unaware of the fear they once held. But their lesson remains. If you want more stories like this, where history is told through human experience and hard choices, subscribe to the channel and stay with us for the next journey.